Hi, this is Ofori Murray, the digital reader, and today this is about my book life in August. The books I bought and the books that I read and my opinion of them. If you've watched this before, then you probably know that I allow myself to buy half the number of books I read in the previous month. So last month I read 4 books. Actually in July I read 4 books. So for August I'm allowing myself to buy 2 books. That's generally my rule as far as paying money for books. Every now and then I'll get a book from here and there, but as a general rule for my budget, it's going to be half of what I read in the previous month. July I read 4, so I bought 2. Let me talk about the 2 books that I bought. The first book is Your Table is Ready by Michael Cecchi-Azzolina. And this is true tales of somebody who's worked at the front of the house for a lot of restaurants in New York over the years. And it's kind of their behind the scenes, their true tales, their shocking tales, kind of what their life has been working in this position and for all these years. So they've worked at a couple different restaurants, so it'll be interesting to hear those tales. This kind of reminds me of almost like the flip side of Anthony Bourdain's Kitchen Confidential that he did years ago, as what he was talking about from the kitchen point of view. This is kind of talking about it from the front of the house waiters and bartenders and front of the house book. So that should be interesting whenever I dive into it. Usually when I buy a book, I'll talk about this at the end of the year, but usually when I buy a book, that doesn't mean I'm going to read it right away. Some books I may read right away, but most books I buy is just because I gave myself a budget. I want to spend that money. So I probably won't get to this book this year, but it'll definitely be moving into my TBR for 2025. The next book I bought, and this is the easy one for you to know, it is the current Lady Sherlock book, A Ruse of Shadows by Sherry Thomas. This is the 8th book in the series, and I will continue to buy them until she stops writing them or I become sick of them, and I am not sick of them. I love these books. That's all I say about it. I read one every month so far. So now kind of talking about the books I read. Since I started this channel, I have been reading books that are much more diverse than I normally ever read and are way out of my comfort zone. This month, I read a lot of books that I would typically read that were in my comfort zone. These were the kind of books I read for years before I tried to branch out and do different things. And those were basically fantasy, action. I used to love to read books that were based off of TVs and movies and role-playing games. So if there's like a Hercules or something like that, and they have a book that's not a retelling of the actual things that happen in a TV show, but kind of like an offshoot of the story, I would always love to see kind of what the writer did with that character. So I read a lot of those books along with a good deal of hero fiction, which I'm thinking, but I think this year, I think I've only read 2 hero fiction books, and I think I only have 1 in my queue that I might get to this year. That is amazing considering how much hero fiction I read before I started this channel. Now, once again, I wasn't the kind of reader I am now, pretty much 4 books a month, but I would generally say 70% of the books I read in the last 10 years were some type of hero fiction or fantasy or, official fan fiction. When I say official fan fiction, maybe Batman or Superman or somebody like that, but the author wrote a prose book about their activities. So the first book that I read in August was Shadows Rising. And Shadows Rising is basically a book that is based off of the Warcraft universe. And these are books that you kind of do have to read the series. These books aren't great at recapping everything. And if you're not a big Warcraft person or a lover of Warcraft, I don't play Warcraft anymore, but I still love the universe. If you're not a fan of Warcraft, these probably aren't going to be a huge hit for you. They're just better books to read. This story basically is, there's two sides in Warcraft. There is the Horde and the Alliance. And the Horde, the head of the Horde was this undead queen called Sylvanas. And she basically did this war atrocity and burned down the elves' home, which even turned the Horde against her. So an uneasy truce has occurred between the Horde and the Alliance, and both of them are kind of putting their heads together, trying to track down Sylvanas, who's become this Hitler-like war criminal that they're trying to catch. And of course, she's trying not to be caught, and she has some secret agendas that she's trying to undertake. So it's a good book. Definitely not a wow book, and a lot of times when I'm going to be rating these books, I have to think, I read a lot of these, so I might rate a book higher than somebody who is new to this or somebody that doesn't read a lot of this. But even given all that book, this book was a good book. It hit all the necessary points. It did a great job of recapping the story and staying in the world and really bringing those characters, to life. But I can't say it was a great book. It gave me all the vitamins and minerals I needed to keep going, and I'll continue to read books in this world, but it didn't really do anything that I'll be like, wow, I want to recommend that book. So because of that, Shadows Rising by Madeleine is going to get 3 stars. Next book, and this is another one that I have a ton of Shadowrun books, and Shadowrun basically is a role-playing game, and it is basically a mashup of cyberpunk and fantasy, where you have trolls and dwarves and hackers and cybernetic samurai. It's cyberpunk, futuristic, and fantasy just mashed together, and I love their world. I don't play the Shadowrun game anymore. I haven't played it for decades, but I really love their world, and I loved their short stories, and I probably have 20 or 30 novellas and short books from Shadowrun, and periodically I'll read a couple. This is an anthology of short stories in the Shadowrun universe, Spells and Chrome. It's put together by John Helfers, who's edited it, and it has some good stories. It has some okay stories. Once again, this is a book that I read, I enjoyed. I wasn't, wow, this is an incredible book, but it gave me everything I needed based off of these. The Shadows Rising and Spells and Chrome, these were the kind of books I always used to read, and I enjoyed them. But if I was sitting down with somebody and I had to pick a book to recommend, I wouldn't start with these two. I probably would start with something like Oliver Twist, or let's be honest, I probably would start with Lady Sherlock, because that is the book I proselytize. I will talk to anybody and try and get them to read a Lady Sherlock book. So for Spells and Chrome, good book, nothing wrong with it. Didn't excel, but good book, so I would definitely go and give it 3 stars. The next book is Judge Dredd. I have been reading the Judge Dredd fiction books, and I have really, really, really been liking these books. They have a series of these Judge Dredd books, basically like from when he started. They have Judge Dredd Year 1. They have a series of stories in an omnibus called Judge Dredd Year 1. This is Judge Dredd Year 2. And then they actually have Judge Dredd Year 3. And then they also have a whole bunch of stories, at various stages of his career. But I would actually recommend Judge Dredd Year 1, Year 2, and Year 3 to somebody, even if they've never read a Judge Dredd book. These are good, action, pulpy books. I like the character. I like the side character. To be honest, in the Judge Dredd books, the side characters are often the most interesting, and I really like this post-apocalyptic science fiction world where they have post-apocalyptic stuff going on, they have science fiction stuff going on, and his characters is kind of Batman-ish, and the characters around him and how they act in this world is really good. So I definitely enjoyed Judge Dredd Year 2. I enjoyed it enough that I would recommend the Judge Dredd Year 1, Year 2, or Year 3 book to somebody. These books also do a good job of giving you just enough so you kind of know what's going on in the world, but I still would recommend Year 2 to somebody. I would definitely recommend Year 1. I haven't gotten to Year 3 yet. And these books are, I try to only get the Judge Dredd omnibus books for the Judge Dredd Year 1 and Year 2 and Year 3. And that's because a lot of the Judge Dredd stories are kind of like Shadowrun. They're shorter. They're novellas or they're short stories, and often they'll collect them into a bigger book they'll call an omnibus. So this is 3 different authors, Michael Carroll, Matt Smith, and Cavan Scott, who put these 3 stories together, which are basically, this is kind of like 3 novellas in this book, and each are in the same time frame, his second year as a judge, but different stuff is going on. But like I said, I definitely enjoyed this book. I'm actually going to read the Judge Dredd Year 3 in August, and this is a book I would definitely give 4 stars to. And the last book on my list, you know it, you know it, you know it. It's a Lady Sherlock book. I don't even know if I have to talk about this much because every month I'm reading a Lady Sherlock book. I just like to space them out once a month for my enjoyment. But basically, this book, Inspector Treadle, who is basically in the Lady Sherlock series, there's Lady Sherlock, there is her romantic paramour, and then there is a cop who peripherally helps Lady Sherlock and her romantic paramour, and his name is Inspector Treadles, and he gets involved in a murder, and it looks like he did it, and it's up to Lady Sherlock to figure out what the truth is behind the whole situation. This is another excellent book. Characters are great. You know, I just really am still thoroughly enjoying Lady Sherlock. And once again, if you haven't read a Lady Sherlock book by Sherry Thomas, you need to read one. This is the kind of series where you really should read them in order. I don't think you'd enjoy it as much if you read it out of order, mainly because there's character development that occurs across all the books and connections and things that happen that really, if you're reading Lady Sherlock, you should start with the first book, and that'll kind of spur you on to the others. Once again, tons of enjoyment. Because I've read so many of these, I'm a little bit numb to them. So although this was an awesome book, they are all awesome books. So when it comes to rating this, I'm going to give this 4 stars. I probably should give it 5. But once again, like I said, I'm getting a little... I feel almost guilty about continually giving them 5 stars. So I'm going to go with 4. It's a great book. I would recommend it. And I look forward to the next one I'm going to read. Like I said, I try and read one of these every month so that even if I don't have a lot of good books in a month, at least I get one banger, because I'm pretty sure that the Lady Sherlock book is going to deliver. So that is what I read and what I bought for the month of August. If you have any questions, you can always hit me up. And this is Ofori, the digital reader, and as always, keep reading.